Next, let's queer up politics. Famous Mormon Republican U.S. Senate candidate says government should stay out of LGBTQ+ issues. Brent Hatch, the son of longtime and powerful former Utah Senator Orrin Hatch, is now running for the Senate himself. He caught GOP insiders off guard this week when he said that the government should stay out of LGBTQ+ issues. Hatch, a Salt Lake City lawyer, said in a recent interview with Newsweek that he thinks the government largely needs to stay out of these things, and people need to live their lives. Hatch didn't go into specifics, but it appears he's distancing himself from many of today's Republicans who have made it a priority to attack the LGBTQ+ community, especially its most vulnerable members, such as transgender youth. As a senator, he said his priorities will include efforts to improve border security and reduce the national debt. He also said he is very clearly pro-life, but considers abortion a personal decision. His view of the history of LGBTQ rights is somewhat at odds with the facts. 10 to 20 years ago, politicians, activists, and ordinary citizens were talking about LGBTQ+ issues: employment discrimination, hate crimes, marriage equality, and more. As LGBTQ+ people and their allies, mostly liberals, fought for equal rights, conservative forces resisted. Some activists have attributed today's widespread anti-trans actions as a response to the progress made by other segments of the LGBTQ+ community. Utah is a Mormon-dominated state and has a notorious past on LGBTQ+ issues. In recent years, there have been church and political changes, and Salt Lake City has become very LGBTQ+ embracing. I think that's right. I think the pushback we are seeing now across the United States is a response to the progress that we have made as an LGBTQ+ community. We're facing some horrifying challenges both federally and in states and local communities throughout the United States. But we also have to remember that we have never had more rights as an LGBTQ community than we do right now. And we do a disservice to all of the activists and volunteers and politicians and organizers who for the past 60, 70 years have fought really hard in much more dangerous times to get us to where we are right now. I think that Hatch, as a politician, is, frankly, as a Republican, is where, Republicans really should be if you are truly someone who believes in a small government. If you're a small government conservative, the government, should not be involved in people's marriages, their bedrooms, if that's what you truly believe. So it's interesting to hear, and refreshing, frankly, to hear someone take that point of view, even if you disagree with it.
Yeah, Hunter, I'd like to bring you in early on this discussion because you're a student of history. You know where we've been. You're right. We are much further along than we were at Stonewall, 1969, but it feels like things are being clawed back. So where are we right now, and where do you think we'll be in 5 years?
It's a great question. We have made tremendous amount of progress, certainly. And to all those leaders that you're referring to who've made progress over the last 20, 30 years, it's just amazing. As bad as DeSantis is, and this is nothing, this is not an endorsement, I do think that this is simply about garnering support. And it's about getting votes among a slice of the electorate out there. And that, I don't know anything about young Hatch here, but I'd like to find out more, because I do think when I read the studies, I see that, young people, whether they're Republican or not, the highest percentages are self-identifying as either trans or bi or queer, and they have had multiple sexual experiences because they have grown up in an environment where that's actually been acceptable to them. I also think there are many people in this country, obviously not hardcore religious zealots, but there are many people who have a gay member of their household, and they love that kid. I mean, even Dick Cheney, came around to the whole thing with regard to this. So yes, we have tremendous rights. What I am worried about, though, as far as rights go, was the passage in the Dobbs decision that talked about gay marriage and contraception and interracial marriage. And those things are...
Well, Justice Thomas talked about it, not the decision as a whole.
I'm sorry that Thomas spoke about that. And those rights are not embedded in the Constitution. They have been pulled from here and there and from different places within the Constitution. And that's actually how Roe versus Wade got overturned. The same thing can happen. So as much liberty and freedom as we think we have today, just look at the Dobbs decision to realize that unless the Constitution and federal law is changed, these things can move away on one vote or two votes or anything else.
Well, to your point, credit where credit is due to President Biden. President Biden, after the Dobbs decision, because of that language that Thomas used, worked with Democrats and Republicans in Congress and passed a Respect for Marriage Act last year and signed it into law to offer us some federal protections in case that comes up in the Supreme Court again. So,
Yes, and that's absolutely right. And we're in a situation in which we have enough support. We have a progressive president. We have a Democratic majority in the Senate, but we still have the problem that we face in the House. But it's just how laws work.
Right. Yeah, Bobby?
And the thing is, I think part of it as a study of when you look back history, especially around when Obergefell came out, a lot of activists think that we are like what I would call Francis Fukuyama's the end of history moment. Francis Fukuyama is basically famously said that in the early 90s that, Cold War's over, that's the end of history. We are all going to be kumbaya and happy. And then look what happened now.
Lasted.
And we look at Obergefell as a watershed moment. Everyone popped champagne. I mean, I was doing my dissertation on LGBTQ bloggers, and a lot of the blogs I follow, basically Obergefell passed, it's done. We're done.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of these, the Moms for Liberty, the Ron DeSantis's, all these stuff, caught us off guard. We were not expecting that kind of ferocious bigotry to be this acceptable in mainstream politics. We just don't. We weren't expecting it. We're expecting the crackpots, the Jerry Falwells of the world, the Pat Robertsons of the world, but we are not expecting a sitting governor to basically attack us so ferociously.
Right, and that is not the Hatch that we are that is presenting itself here today. Ty, what do you think?
So to bring it back to Hatch more specifically, I'm not sure how to take what he's saying.
I'm not either.
Because on one hand, it sounds progressive from a conservative to say, you know what, let's leave this alone. Let's not, and that might win him some votes in an increasingly progressive Utah. But if we just if politics just stays out of LGBTQ plus issues, then we don't advance. We don't get the rights that we need to have codified in law. So, on one hand, it sounds good from his perspective maybe to say that, but I think from our perspective, we need to be cautious of hearing that, because just to embrace him saying that is to embrace a potential victimization of ourselves.
Yeah.
He kind of reminds me of Democrats circa 2003, 2004, when George Bush was doing, trying to change the Constitution, and all the little mini DOMAs were voted on in the 2004 election, which essentially re-elected George Bush.
Yeah.
100%. Let's say that. The thing about Hatch is his dad was a senator, a long-serving senator, and he lost his seat because he was primaried. A Democrat didn't beat him. He was primaried because he wasn't conservative enough when he was doing his whatever it is he did. Mitt Romney is the seat that Hatch is trying to take. Mitt Romney, who just a decade ago, who just 12 years ago was like the worst case scenario, is now our best friend on the Republican side of the aisle. So that tells you how far we've come. But he voted for the Respect for Marriage Act last year. So Utah is moving, but will they move back from Romney? And this sort of appears to be someone who's trying to thread the needle. He does come from Salt Lake City, like we mentioned in the story. Salt Lake City is, I'm not going to call them, they're the Broward of Utah. They are this little dot in the middle of this Red Sea that elects LGBTQ plus people, has safe spaces, has pride flags in business windows. So where he comes from, his voter base is obviously going to be in Salt Lake City and in the Mormon Church. And you talked about holds us back from progress. I think, but what the most we can ask for right now from Republicans is don't impede our progress.
Yeah.
Don't just if you're not going to hate us, we appreciate you. Just stand
Step
off
aside.
to the side. Let us do our thing. And so I'm rather gnaw off my left arm than sit here and endorse a Republican for any U.S. Senate seat. But over the course of all evils, he may seem to be the better one. We'll see. We don't even know if he'll make it out of the primary, though. Right.
Yeah.
So we will be watching this through the spring primaries and maybe this November.